Welcome, everyone, to this week's Cat's Eye on the Future. This week, we have a very special show. Have you ever wondered about those psychic reading sites? You know, the ones that advertise on TV, radio, or the internet? Have you ever been tempted to try one and see just how it works? Well, tonight, I have the owner of the website psychicsvideolive.com, Sandra Burrell, and we'll also be joined by another talk show host, Joyce Marie, who is also a psychic who works on the site. First, I'd like to welcome both of you and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Melodi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Okay, and Sandra, I think I'll start with you. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and how you got interested in the psychic reading business?
I can, Melodi. My background is in business. I've been in business for about 25 years in Ireland. And about 2.5 years ago, I kind of got an opportunity to hop out in one business and start to look at another. And I was sitting down with my son one day saying, what will I do? You know, and he said, God, this time at least make it something that's your passion. So I went around looking and thinking, and we talked for a long time and kept coming back to psychic, self-development, that kind of area. So we kind of looked and said, well, what's the next thing in that? And really it was video. So that was where it started. So that's really how I got into it.
So are you yourself a psychic reader, or are you just sort of interested in it as a business from...
No, I'm not a psychic reader, Melodi, but what I did a few years ago is I did Reiki healing. And it was after doing that I had a couple of experiences myself. I wouldn't call myself psychic, right? But I had a couple of experiences where while I was doing healings, I felt things that I wouldn't normally feel. And I kind of heard things in my head that I wouldn't normally hear. And it was at that time that I suppose I really got a much deeper interest into the whole psychic world. So that's probably what brought me into it more.
Joyce, did you have a comment?
Well, no, I'm just kind of smiling, though. This is Sandra. I'm not so psychic. Burrell. I love stories like that, though.
Well, I don't know that I'm psychic, Joyce, I suppose. Maybe I'm a little bit. I don't know.
Okay, then, Joyce, what about you? Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what led you to become a psychic reader?
Melanie, well, I don't have quite the exciting business background or the, again, lovely Irish lilt that Sandra does. But I have spent an arena in a number of years, decades, in the professional arena of, I'm an architect and engineer, and I'm a trained business coach, mentor, and trainer. And my abilities flooded in shockingly overnight. And it was quite remarkable. I went to a professional conference in Atlanta, Georgia, and woke up one morning and literally thought I was in the wrong hotel room because it was packed with people I didn't know. And in that, I noticed they're moving in and out of the walls, strange things like that. And it came in overnight. And so once I got over the shock of that, becoming a reader was just a natural offshoot of my journey.
I'm just curious, was there anything going on in your life that was maybe kind of stressful or anything that led up to that right before it happened? Or did it really just totally come out of the blue?
It came out of the blue, but it was prompted by, I would say, an exchange I had with a friend of mine at the conference the night before, which was kind of out of the ordinary for both of us as well. But boom, surprise.
I was wondering because on some of the other shows that my regular listeners may recall, I've talked about how sometimes when people just have it happen boom overnight, often, not always, but often there may have been an illness, physical or some other issue that has preceded it and just sort of, shocks people into suddenly becoming aware. But, that isn't always the case. It sounds to me like yours just sort of naturally came when it was coming.
Yeah, that was it. No, there wasn't any illness or anything. Gosh, that would have been easy.
Yeah, well, you at least would have known what maybe brought it on.
Right.
Well, so what type of, can you tell us what type of readings you do? Do you have a favorite method or anything?
I don't. I like to go ahead and tailor the readings that I do for whoever shows up in front of me. I have the ability to tailor them for you. And
Right.
so I have a wide array of, again, sixth sense abilities, and I couple them with, again, my extensive professional trainings. And based upon what you're looking for, I can tailor them to you. I don't need tools. I'm a psychic and a psychic medium, actually. But especially on Sandra's wonderful site, which I think is just unique and I love it, I can use cards. I work with very rare things called Andara crystals, and they're beautiful. These kinds of things just give visuals to the people in which I'm talking with, and it can help keep them more engaged. So I can use all kinds of cards and oracle cards and pendulums. I'll throw some Huna shaman stones for, effect if I need to. But it all still taps into the spirit world.
Right. Okay. So, do you have find any difference between reading for people in person and reading them with the video?
Not for me. I can read any way you want, probably even sitting on my head, and I am being silly. What I like about Sandra's site especially is it allows me as a reader, and this is a great comfort to her clients, it allows me as a reader, since they see me, at least in the initial piece of interacting with me, it allows me to pick up on true information, true energy, what their true intent is, because I don't visually see them until they take me into a private session, a VIP session.
So can you actually kind of sense what they may be a little bit like, or what may be their issue, just from them typing at you, or do you have to wait till you see them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, because that really stretches me to turn into the pure information around that particular individual, not go ahead and interpret it through, whatever's going on with me, my teenage son not getting his homework done, or my dog's barking too much, or anything like that.
Yeah, I find sometimes when I'm reading, that's one of the challenges too, is just to keep my mind on, once I really get caught up in it, I'm great. But, the mind tending to wander and things, it really helps to have some kind of focus. I think that's one reason I really like using cards or other tools myself. But everybody is different. And I think that's one of the things, and one of the things about psychic reading sites, when they're good sites, and there are a number of good sites out there, I think, they provide the client with a number of different choices. But I'd like to know, Sandra, what do you think of basically obviously you like the idea of having video and doing internet readings and this sort of thing, but what do you think about psychic reading sites in general? What has been your overall impression now that you're a business person in the industry?
I suppose from a personal point of view, I would have phoned some psychics on psychic lines, on phone lines, over the years, and enjoyed the experience, if I'm honest. And the only reason that we probably talked about going on to video is because the one thing I missed on the phone lines was the connection with the psychic, was actually seeing the psychic. And I don't know, getting a sense that you were communicating with another person. I mean, I know you are when you're on the phone, but it's just a more, to me, it would be a more real experience. So that's probably why we went down the road of video as opposed to, telephone lines. And the other thing I wanted to do on the site, which maybe is slightly different, is I'm very much into the kind of self-development end of it, different types of, ethoses in life and whatever. And I really wanted to open that up. And that's why, in the blog, we have a couple of different things. Like one is Joyce Marie's blog, which is called Love Prescriptions, which is lovely. Like last week, she did one on, the I think putting gardening and your love life in the one sentence, which was lovely, like how to, take care of your relationships. And, the other one was on the book club, which had to do with self-help books. And it's just a site full of that kind of stuff, along with the psychics, because I always believed those two worlds married together, but I never believed they were truly brought together on the sites that I saw. So I don't know if that answers your question or if I've gone around in circles.
That doesn't matter. What I'm curious about is basically, so what you're saying is your particular site is actually designed to be more of a holistic site and provide information on other topics. You're not just providing psychics.
Absolutely, and the reason for that is I believe that psychics have been put into one bracket for years, and to some degree, at times people can, I don't know, like just fob it off as something, that's just made up or whatever. But I actually believe it's a whole lifestyle. I think it's everything brought together. And that's why when I was developing the site, it was so important to me to bring all of these things together. Like on the site, there's the relaxation room where people can go in and clear the chakras. They can do a meditation to make themselves feel a little better if they're feeling down. All of those things are free. And they're all as tools and aids for the psychics on the site as well, so that the psychics can send people to different parts of the site, maybe to learn a little bit more. I just think those two worlds should be married more.
So are you offering classes and things as well, or just the information?
In time. We'll go down that road in time. At the moment, we're, I suppose, making sure that the psychics are comfortable on the site, that's all working well. And then, we've loads of other ideas maybe to develop further on along the way, and not too far down the road. It's just literally because we've only launched in the last 10 days, it's to get everybody in and everything working really well, which it is so far, and get everyone to know each other. So that's really the way we're starting, and then we'll start to develop. But it's truly to bring those worlds together, because I think there's a more modern way to look at the psychic world than the way it was looked at before.
Okay, and if a person wanted to, they'll approach one of your readers, well, what types of skills and things would people expect to see? I mean, I realize different readers are going to do different sorts of things, but can you give me kind of an overview of the type of services your psychics are offering?
I can, Melody. It's really down from tarot card readings to angel card readings, but mostly as I've talked to all the psychics, right, each and every one of the psychics tell me that really it's intuitive, and I think listening to Joyce there tonight, she's saying the same, that, it's in there, and the rest are tools, like whether they're the angel cards, the tarot cards or whatever. There's going to be numerology. There's a lovely lady called Louise Sullivan, and she is a numerologist, and she'll be with us more often after Christmas than she is at the moment. She'll be on it full time. We've got Kate Cajo, who is a very experienced astrologer. She's from the UK, and she does the horoscopes on the site, and she also brings astrology into her readings. She's also one of the old school, because she uses the crystal ball, and she's a palmist and that. Her brother Ron, Francis Cajo, will be on the site as well, and he has all of those skills as well. So there's a number of different skills on the site.
Joyce, getting back to you, since you're actually they actually are a reader, could you maybe go back and tell us a little bit about some of the more interesting or unusual readings you may have had? I mean, obviously, you wouldn't give clients names or anything. I want to stress with good psychic reading sites, that's always confidential. And,
right.
But just kind of in general, something interesting things that have happened.
Well, some of the more interesting things are always when people want to know about those that have crossed over, loved ones that have crossed over. I find the spirit world absolutely fascinating and hilarious, and they show up to me a lot like that. And so for me, it's always, do you tell them or you don't? I had a woman whose mother passed away from lung cancer. She was a lifetime chain smoker, and the woman shows up with 3 or 4 cartons of cigarettes to me under her arm going, hey, tell her I can have all of these I want now. It doesn't matter. Just silly little things like that. They're funny. They'll gentlemen who cross and pass in their 80s, 85, 90, who might be bald, come back in their 20s and 30s with lots of silky hair. It's just lovely things like that tend to happen when one works with spirits. It's always the unexpected. But, They come back with, I had one gentleman show up in the middle of his office just putting golf balls like he used to all the time in the middle of his office. And when I would communicate with him, he'd say, don't, hush, let me sink this one. And, his loved ones are sitting in the room, or on the other line going, well, what does he say? He's not saying much right now. And shh, tell them to be quiet. Or, the mother who was always in charge of the entire family, who always talked over everybody, shows back up. And it was one of the strangest things I've ever seen. She's in the middle of the room talking to her daughter, and lined up along the walls and sitting in chairs very quietly are all the other relatives that are on the other side. She made them all sit down, and nobody could get up and speak because she was in charge. I mean, it's just sometimes the craziest things.
That's really, I like that. I love that image of the mother just still controlling things from her, from the other side. I'm curious, when you see spirits, do they seem solid to you? I mean, do you see them with your physical eyes, or do you sort of perceive them?
I am actually an anomaly. I will tell you that. From the second I woke up, the stuff that started to happened as if I had been working with it my entire life. I woke up at an age older than most people, and to a degree very few do. And so, yes, I see them as full-bodied, just as solid as if you were sitting in the room with me. I see energies. I see tendrils of light that connect, leaf to leaf, branch to branch, tree to tree, squirrel to tree. I see light and colored lights around people and coming out of there. I'm not alone. I'm never alone.
Yeah, I've had, I don't have this particular gift, but I've had friends that do, and they've said, do you ever sometimes have trouble telling whether someone is someone who has crossed over, or from someone who is just actually living on this plane?
No, not at all. There's a difference I also, I pick up frequencies and nuances of energy. I can tell the different frequencies. They have texture, they have color, they have depth, they have temperature. And those that have crossed over have a completely different vibration and frequency than those that are here in body on the earthly plane.
What is some of the more common things that they want to tell the loved ones when they come back to visit?
Most of the time, and I'm aligned with some groups that pair mediums with grieving families, and I've actually gone through grief training in order to be more effective at that. And that being said, there's three groups actually that come to me. Those that are just in so abject of mourning that they can't particularly function. I just had one lovely woman once come for a session with me, and she literally sat there for 90 minutes and just sobbed because her husband had passed away months earlier from leukemia. To just know that he's there. And in some ways, she was rather sensitive, but because of her extreme grief, was blocking her ability to sense him around her. But her two small children saw him all the time. They just kept on having relationships with Dad because he was around it all the time. There's that aspect of it. And he came through to just try to console her and to have me tell her, he's there, he's there, he's not gone, he's just in a different form. So there's a great consolation of grief. If it was a painful passing, at least what we perceive as painful, or a sudden passing, they want their loved ones to know they're okay. They can perceive, it seems, and pick up what the emotions are that are going on around here. I've had one very angry woman come to see me once and just sat down with her arms crossed and demand to talk to Larry. Well, Larry was her boyfriend, and he's standing about 5 feet behind her with his arms up, going, "No, no, don't tell her I'm here," you know. So she had great anger issues relative to his passing. There's just a whole range of emotions. I mean, I've even had, a couple of people come to me to try to get answers from the other side, not legally, I don't work in the law enforcement arena, but about suspicious passings and whether it was suicide, accidental overdose, or some things like that. It really is to help with the human grief and loss cycle.
Have you ever had any visitations from someone who's crossed over that desperately wants something finished or something found, or something like that, where they're trying to tell the family?
Yeah, I did when I first woke up. It was like a feeding frenzy on me. It's like a shark feeding. Ooh, look, fresh energy. Who can see us? And spirits would show up all the time. They would show up for me to help cross them over if they were earthbound. They would show up because they had a message for somebody. I remember the last straw was I was relaxing in a lovely, lovely bathtub one night when 3 of them showed up and wanted me to help them. And I'm like, seriously, please, get out. I have office hours. And I started to set up boundaries where only when I was working would I start to interact with them. Now what happens is they'll come in and they'll say, "Oh yeah, tell my wife she dropped the ring down the drain," or tell her that the envelope and the letter she's looking for is behind the sofa, over there near the window. Those kinds of things go ahead and show up a lot.
Okay, that's really, I was wondering about that because I'd started to do a show on basically on something on this topic and just didn't get anywhere. And this is fascinating to me because you're basically saying much better than I could from personal experience, basically talking about these things, which I think is really, really amazing, things that I've heard about. But once in a while I'll get like an impression or something, but I actually seeing people all the time. Actually, could you tell us the difference, my listeners, the difference maybe between an earthbound spirit or one that's just coming back to visit? Because that's something I think people are interested in.
All right. I don't think we have 8 hours or a few beers for all of us to sit and look at this.
No, but we have some time.
We have some time. Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying I can only tell you what I observe. If I knew what was really happening or what was going on, I think I'd be God. But I have noticed that as we cross over, we have a choice as to what we're going to do. And a lot of spirits, I had a family recently bring me in for what's called a family gallery. 20, 30 family members flew in from all over the country so they could connect with their mother and their grandmother. And they brought me in to be the medium to do so. And during that time, the woman in question actually told them that she promised them she would stay around and be around them. We also seem to have choices to not stay around our families and move on to other things, other realms, other dimensions, other places. It seems as though we can have a choice to hang around our family, and as long as we think is necessary. We also seem, and I'm going to probably diverge from the metaphysical community, are there still certain earthbound spirits? I'm going to tell you I believe there are. I see them all the time. But I believe it's more of a choice rather than being stuck, not wanting to cross over, being evil, anything like that. I think those spirits, at least from what I've experienced, seem to want to still kind of hang out around here in what some people have described as, limbo or, being earthbound or whatever. I still think it's a bit of a choice. I actually have had an NDE, and everything that happened to me, a near-death experience, was all based on choice. I chose to come back when I was offered that ability. Once I got back here, I was really ticked off I made that choice for a while. But I think it's all a choice.
Have you ever encountered or seen what appears at first to be a spirit, but actually seems to be more like a psychic photograph of something that's happened in a house or a place? Or
Yes. I not only do I work on Sandra's lovely video line, but I have my own private practice, and part of it is in working with actually some highly recognized international paranormal researchers and parapsychologists. And so we go do what is commonly termed as ghost hunts. They're not anything like on TV. They're much more tame, but I have seen all kinds of things like that. And yes, the parapsychologists do take the photographs.
Well, the reason I ask is that living in Ireland, of course, I think most people actually believe in some sort of ghost. They don't always talk about it a lot, but particularly you have this many old buildings and this much history. You know, anytime you go someplace, particularly that's historic, they'll tell you about the White Lady, or you know, the Sir Arthur that rides with his hounds, or you know, whatever. Usually it's
Right.
someone who died tragically for love or something. And some of them to me appear to be maybe actual people who decided to stay around. In fact, I've actually run into that at least once when we rented a castle for a while, and that was very interesting. I'll probably talk about that on another show sometime. But a lot of them just seem to be more like photographs, like, you know, maybe the person isn't really there, but whatever happened was so horrible, it just made some sort of impression.
Correct.
And
Correct.
and I just wondered if you saw those things sometimes.
I've seen it in three different ways. Number one, the first one you alluded to, which would be very much like the castle. They're still there. Two, there are things called impressions. And because of the high emotional value of the event that has occurred, the energetic impression is definitely there and will reoccur again and again and again. And some people who are very sensitive can perceive that. And then three, I believe very few of us understand just how powerful a spirit we really are in this human form. And I believe, and I've seen it, because we know the story, because we know what other people have seen, we actually subconsciously can muster the forces to create forms for ourselves and see them and then think, wow, there really is a ghost, when in fact we've made that up for ourselves.
So that would be sort of like creating a thought form.
Yes, absolutely. You know, like teenagers, most poltergeist activities, a good 96, 97% can be attributed to the high emotions that teenagers, especially highly sensitive teenagers, can go through. This is why, you know, sitting in their room, objects fly across the room.
So how would a teenager's emotions cause that to happen?
Lots of hormones raging, lots of high emotions. I'm going to that dance, no matter what you tell me, Dad. You know, that kind of thing. These extreme emotions of excitement, happiness, rage, all those things that teenagers go through can actually get objects to move. Wow. It's a pretty well documented phenomenon.
I'm just sitting here amazed, because you're basically, from a first person, doing the entire show I tried to do last week and just couldn't do, and wound up doing something else. So I'm very, very happy that we're having this interview. Even though we've kind of segued off of our original topic, I actually think this is really fascinating, and I think it also gives the listeners the insight how, you know, each person that reads on a site, that's a reader, is going to bring a lot of times totally different skills. And you know, I said I sometimes get impressions of things. Sometimes I can sort of feel the dead or the crossed over people or spirits. Actually, that's something else that I'd be curious. Have you encountered beings that haven't crossed over, that say maybe have never had an earthly life?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Let's just get that out of the way. I work with and am very, very pleased to have as even some of my mentors, some of the leading people in what's called exoconsciousness. If people are calling them UFOs and ufology today, they're amateurs. They're not up on things that are really going on. Today it's called exoconsciousness, and it really becomes a matter of beings that have a consciousness higher than ours, thus exoconsciousness, and can move from higher levels of vibration that most people haven't even thought about to this one. It's all about frequency, and whether you've really got a spacecraft or not is irrelevant. But there are innumerable dimensions, higher and actually lower. I've been privy to a fabulous reptilian realm, which a lot of people would be frightened by, but has intelligence and energy and things to share. It's actually quite infinite, the different levels of beings and things that are out there. And again, in study, again, off Sandra's wonderful site, I'm actually been working and doing a thesis for a PhD in metaphysics. And as part of that work has been diving into depth into exoconsciousness. And just in passing, I lead spiritual journeys to different significant sites around the planet, one of which is Mount Shasta, California. And I have had significant exoconsciousness experiences. If anybody knows, the lore of the mountain is such that it's a significant site for extra or ET activity.
That's really interesting because years ago, I don't do this professionally on anybody's site. I do it in a connection with my Nora's religious beliefs, but I am trained as a trance worker, which is not quite the same thing as a medium, although sometimes mediumship goes along with that.
Sure.
But I was in trance at a friend's house. He's a Native American elder at a ceremony he was doing at around the foot of Mount Shasta, which is where he used to live. And I didn't remember anything I said, but when I came back, he said I was talking about, the basically star people and, things coming out of the sky. And I just sort of, and UFOs and things, and I just sort of filed it all. I have a part of my mind that I file under interesting, and that's where I filed it, because I just didn't have any background. I was not aware of at that time of, apparently there is a lot of legends and things about them in that area.
I guess because of just what most people don't understand or know, that if you peruse a fabulous site like Sandra's, psychicsvideolive.com, the depth and the breadth of the people that she's been able to bring on in order to do a single tarot spread on relationships for you. There's so much more depth to the training of the psychics that are on her site than people know, which is why they ought to give it a shot and give it a try.
I totally agree with you, because this is why I'm really, really pleased to have had you on. And I want to thank Sandra for suggesting it, because I think that, again, it just shows this is just one person. My audience is familiar with me, and I also do read on Sandra's site sometimes as well under Mystic Melodi, but it's just we're all a lot more complex than just. I guess one thing I wanted to bring up here is, I won't name the site, but the problem with some not psychic video sites per se, but psychic hotlines in general, is I had a close friend living with me for a while, and she was on what's called the dole. She was pregnant, and she and her husband were living with us, and since she didn't have a job, she was required to go to the job office, even though she obviously wasn't going to be getting one right then. And she came back, she said, "Melodi, you won't believe this." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Such and such hotline that no longer exists, but was very famous in Ireland for having psychic readings. Such and such a hotline had a notice in the job office saying psychic readers wanted no experience necessary."
well,
she was going, but how can they do that? I'm going, well, they're just. I said, well, when I was first looking into doing this, I found another site. This was an American site that at that time, it was early on in the days of the internet. They didn't have security very well. And there was a site that said, for the readers only. And I clicked and I got in. And it was basically instructions on how to fake a reading.
There are still innumerable sites like that. And I guess what I can do is just focus on being different from all of that.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things I liked about Sandra's site is I can assure you that at least the people I know and I've met so far, we're not doing that. I'm not doing that. Joyce isn't doing that. Sandra is hiring people that don't do that. Sandra's not the only place that does it right, but it's one of those things where it's kind of a crapshoot and that is one of the problems with the industry. But I think as communication is improving, and that's one thing where the internet is really helping, because you can get a lot more information and references and things before going and spending your money, basically.
Right.
You have been listening to part 1 of Cat's Eye on the Future. We'll return to the show right after these short messages. Do you have questions? The cards have answers. If you would like a personal reading with Melodi, just go to my website, melodipsychicreadings.com. That's Melodi with an I, psychicreadings.com, for information, or email me at melodireader@gmail.com. Readings are available using Skype, phone, email, or even in person if you are lucky to live in Ireland. Why not find out what special messages the cards have just for you and book a private reading today? We now return to part 2 of Cat's Eye on the Future. Well, I think this has been really interesting, and I think at this point what might be kind of fun, and I've talked to Joyce beforehand, I think it would be really fun if we actually sort of had a reading on the air. My readers are familiar, my listeners are familiar with me doing readings. Sometimes the listeners have sent questions in, and I've done personal readings of a similar sort to what you'd get on the video site. But not exactly, because it's basically almost like an email reading, except I'm talking about it. And I also do, my real specialty on the show is doing readings for current events and making educated guesses. But I thought we'd ask Joyce to do a reading, just pretty much like we would do if you were listening to or coming onto the video site. Okay. Only because we're doing it on radio, we won't see the video, but you'll hear.
You won't see the video, but I can pretend.
Exactly. Okay, so
right.
I'm going to pretend that I'm the client, and I'm going to ask the question that I get more than anything else. Joyce, could you just do me kind of a general reading? I just kind of like to know what's going on in my life and what might be coming up soon.
We're not going to put Joyce on the spot. Okay, first of all, I will tell everybody that I like to, it's your reading, but I like to run the reading. So if you show up on Sandra's site, I'm going to say, and you come into my chat room, I'm going to say, hi, welcome to Psychics Video Live. I'm Joyce, and I'm the live psychic.
Okay.
But, I'll ask for your first name. May I have your first name, please?
It's Melodi.
Okay, Melodi, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
Oh, I'm fabulous. Thanks for asking. And you want just a general reading. All right. Well, let me go ahead and grab my cards. I'm going to grab my traditional tarot deck here and shuffle them a little bit, and we'll start generally for you. Oh, my. Aren't you just a unique, fabulous individual, Melanie? All right. Always thinking, always having ideas, always moving forward. The energy around you, and I'm not going to ask you your age, but is that of these fabulous people that are just charging out of college with the stars in their sky, in their eyes, going ahead and thinking about the possibilities. You're always thinking about possibilities. Where am I going? And, which is okay, because you're not going to finish the details most of the time anyway, but that's all right. We're not going to worry about that. The other fabulous thing about you is you know how the system, you know how our life, how the universe works. you come across as the Queen of Pentacles. As you know, the Queen always gets what she wants, but every now and then she's got to go ahead and isolate herself and kind of sit in her beautiful garden and kind of clear away the clutter, and think about what it might be as the next big conquest. And I do mean that big conquest. You don't mind the little things in life that matter, but every now and then you're going to want to go after, the big thing too. It's a lovely part of you. You will also tend to, and there's something coming up here in the near future, so be aware of it, tend to take too much on at once. You get all these great ideas and you'll start them, and then another great one comes, and it's getting a bit long in the tooth. Learning to work more strategically, learning to even operate daily through your life as a human being will probably do you better. But whatever it is that's going on, your immediate future is got that of, again, this fresh energy, ready to take the world on. I love this about you, the Page of Swords. And you're blessed by the Ace of Cups. That is your influence card in all of this. The only thing I'm concerned about, and again, we're very, very general, like many of us, you tend to get in your own way. But when you do, you'll hit these depths of despair. You love to live your life in these, and this is your DNA, sweetie, these outer energy regions that you're in. Your highs are high, they're extraordinary, they're lovely, and sometimes your lows can be low. When you're on, you're this magnificent symphony orchestra, and when you're just a little tiny off, everything becomes a disaster. But my point with that is you make the disaster time worse with some of those thoughts of yours. I hope that's a pattern you consider changing as you continue on this journey through this transition you're going through at this time, which is actually quite a lovely transition into this next phase of your life. Oh, you're just fabulous. My gosh, if you and I lived near each other, we'd become drinking buddies. Now, Melanie, that's the 50,000-foot view. You can ask me any kind of detailed question you want.
You've actually been amazingly accurate. I'm not surprised, but it's I'm a little surprised at the Queen of Pentacles at this, but perhaps it's the time period of my life because I'm actually approaching, believe it or not, my second Saturn return. So I don't know that much about it, but my friends with astrologers have told me to get ready.
Yeah.
And I remember the first one going around singing, making up very silly songs about it rather than cry. So I'm going to take to heart what you said about, trying not to think, because you're right. I go either way high or way low. It's not really, it doesn't seem to be really a serious thing, but it's just, I feel things, being an empath, I feel things very, very deeply. And I get very mad at myself when I overextend and then collapse, basically. It's what happens.
Right. It's a pattern. When you go through this transition, it's going to highlight for you those things that it's time to finally drop away like rust off a car. Okay. If you hang on to them any longer, it's not going to be pretty. So when the lows come, look at those as cleverly disguised gifts to kind of highlight for you what it is it's time to deal with and let go.
Yeah, because the other thing that's going on, and this possibly explains some of the energy, although I think people mistake me for being in my 20s from the voice and I guess the energy level. Because when I'm on, I'm on. When I'm off, I'm off. But people don't see that.
Much so, very much so. Gosh, yeah. I'll take some of that 20-something energy.
I know. I don't know quite where. Well, it comes when I'm basically my family. Well, my father was a professional musician, and I was a semi-professional musician for a while. So it's that being on stage. You
Ah.
know, I get very high being on stage. You know, I'm the Scorpio, you know, that sort of Scorpio.
Ah.
But then my birthday is Wednesday, so you know that gives you an idea
Well,
of the.
happy birthday.
Thank you.
I
And
might recommend you hire some of Sandra's astrologers she talked about and get your chart read.
yeah, I do have actually I have a friend who's an astrologer who she's the one that told me get ready, your second Saturn return is here, there, just about.
Mm.
So and I she gave me some idea actually honestly what that meant. But for my listeners, I'm not an astrologer, but basically Saturn returns are when your planets line up a certain way every 30 years, and so we get them at 30, around 60, and around 90, and they tend to be real tipping points in people's lives. So I can say that. So Joyce is absolutely correct that I have this tipping point. I also have a husband who is 10 years younger than me, and he is going back to medical school. So we have this student thing going on, which I thought you might be interested in
Okay.
on
And
his side.
and what okay, and what would you like me to look at relative to that?
I would like, if you have time, to look at, we're trying to decide when he graduates where he should practice. What country?
Okay. First thing is it's an irrelevant question.
Okay.
He is just so pleased. He really is. He's so pleased. He could go anywhere and really be a fabulous physician. So keep that in mind. I suspect it's going to be more of your input, quite frankly, as to where you would like to go. I'm also seeing him being very, what I call, placeable. He can apply to just about anywhere, and they're going to want to take him. I know everybody gets worried about residencies and positions and all of that kind of thing, but I'm seeing him sharp, astute, significantly more mature and well-armed than younger people going to medical school. You know, he just wants to be a physician, sweetie.
Yeah, you've described him to a T. He had a PhD in another topic altogether in Old Norse studies, and he went back in a special program for people who had masters and PhDs in other topics, or excuse me, you know, that were not physicians. Almost all of his class is science majors except him, and he's like at one of the top 3 people in the class.
Precisely. He's just a natural, and his prior, I'm not going to call it philosophical, but philosophical historical background is going to afford him a softness and an empathy his colleagues don't normally have.
He had one of his major professors that just retired, that used to be head of the program until last year, told him that he would be perfectly happy to have him as his family physician.
Yeah.
That was first year.
So I would say, you know, where do you guys want to go? Start to think of it that way, because that's a better approach to where does he resonate. I mean, there are some areas that are harsher than not for him. Are you all wanting to stay over on that side of the pond?
Not necessarily. We're very open.
Okay. I would avoid places like Kansas.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know, Sandra, I don't know if you've ever been to Kansas. Please don't want to go there.
No.
I've made a lot of friends from Kansas just now. But, you know, something where there's a nice eclectic mix. Places like actually Boston, the intelligentsia is there, plus there's culture, there's a lot. Places like San Francisco, again, the mix of intelligentsia, European cities like that, if you guys want to go. I will also tell you, if you all decide to stay in Ireland, it's just got a lovely, lovely energy for you, too.
Okay. There are practical issues with the medical system here. I think it's really more where he's sort of basing his decision on.
Okay.
But we haven't made a final decision yet on anything. But we have.
Well, the medical profession here in the States is, God, is a mess. So.
Which is why we're probably not going where I really want to go, but that's neither
Right.
here nor there, which would make us able to be drinking buddies. Let's put it that way.
But if you want that question answered, there's a lot of fabulous readers on Sandra's site.
Yeah. Oh well, no. Trust me. I hadn't actually intended to ask you that, but when you said, can we bring it in, that was something that I thought, okay, well, I'll just throw it out there, because I get those kind of questions too, and very much I'll often get the same kind of answer, even when I use the cards. It'll one of my favorite ones actually was years ago. I had a friend when I just moved to the UK to be with my husband. He was just finishing his first PhD then, and she was a friend of mine actually from the States. And the question, she'd just gotten a messy divorce, and the question was, should she stay in England or should she stay in the United States? Should she go back to the United States? The cards were identical. They were absolutely identical.
Well, we tried to.
And my said was, it doesn't matter. It's your decision, because you're going to face the same problems and decisions either place.
Precisely.
Yeah. So
sometimes we look at the system of how the energies in the universe works inside out. It's like a giant 401k, which is, our retirement funds here in the States, and whatever you put in, you get back out exactly. But we muck it up because we try to figure out all the details first, rather than say, I wonder what the qualities of it is like, give me some intuitive guidance, and then look at that and then use the details to make it happen.
Exactly. Well, I think this has been an absolutely wonderful reading. I'm really very happy with it. And I will probably take your advice at some point and do some possibly do some reading exchanges with other people. But as this was saying, I have not personally. I want to tell my listeners too. I have not had a personal reading in probably over a year, partly because I've just been so busy. Which I think happens to us when we start doing this kind of work. It just, everybody but ourselves. So that's just so. This has been really enlightening. Okay, so I think that's kind of probably a great way to sort of close out. But first, I want to go back to Sandra, and I want to first ask you if there's anything else you'd like to talk about, and also give out details of the website and how people can contact you.
Well, see, I'm just sitting here smiling to myself and saying, you were asking me earlier why I've got into the psychic business. Like, I'm after sitting here for 3/4 of an hour, and it's just fascinating when you're sitting the other end listening to it. And I'm thinking, God, aren't I the luckiest person in the world, really? Because to work in this and not know about it, like, I'm learning all the time, and it's just absolutely fascinating. I mean, half of what you're talking about, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like, do you experience the things that most of us never experience in life? And I'm saying that now as the owner of a psychic site, but it is fascinating when you're not a psychic to sit and listen to it. But anyway, getting away from that, you were asking me, is there anything else I wanted to say? I just wanted to say that I love the business that I'm in now. I love the people I'm dealing with. And every day I get up and I talk to these psychics from all over the place. It's just a richer world for me. And I really want people to come on. I love the site. I mean, it's psychicsvideolive.com, and we really do hope that it just takes off and gives people what they're looking for.
Thank you. And Joyce, would you like to give us a contact details or anything about your website or your radio show or anything?
Well, everybody can come find me on psychicslivevideo.com. I do have a very popular radio show myself. It's on the iHeart Radio Network, which is iHeart.com, and the Women for Women W4WN.com, and it's called Sane Talk, and it's every Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Well, Eastern Standard now. We have this lunacy here with clocks in the U.S. But I think everybody can find me between there and Sandra's site.
Well, great. Well, I want to thank you both so much for being here this evening at Cat's Eye on the Future. But I think it's time to just kind of close out and say good night. So good night.
Good night, Melodi.
Good night. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Again, thank you, and I look forward to seeing all my listeners again next week for Cat's Eye on the Future.
You have been listening to Cat's Eye on the Future, the show where we take a look at what's coming up in your world and your future. Join us again next time for another episode of Cat's Eye on the Future.